Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 2nd of February 2025. I'm sporting my Car for Ukraine t shirt I was kindly given by Ivan and the crew. And I've got one of my flags up, which is one given to me by James. Super happy with that. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult to fit all my flags in, but that's the one with the tattoo artist creating a beautiful rendition of a quadcopter and the unit's sign as well. I need to get my flag up somewhere from Ivan too. Anyway, I am back in the driving seat. We're going to go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You find them in the description to the video below. 1,320 personnel lost is not too bad a figure okay. It is a really high number. It's above 1,300, uh, but it's not the sort of 1,700, even 2,000 figures that we have seen, obviously. So still pretty high, but the lower end of the high the range. 6 tanks below the daily average, 14 troop carrying AFVs, likewise 45 artillery systems. Well above, that's over double the daily average, so significant numbers there. One multiple launch rocket system, 80 vehicles and fuel tanks, very high there, and 2 pieces of special equipment. We have an Andrew perpetual loss list. I've got sort of 3 other lists to update as well. I'll do a little bit of an extra one, including yesterday's numbers. As you can see there, that's a good 3-to-1 overall loss ratio. Combat asset losses about 1.5 to 1. It's mainly in the trucks, ATVs, and civilian vehicles that the Russians are losing an awful lot of kit. And there are some claims that, well, actually, that's because that's what they're using on the front lines. A couple of interesting stats to look at here. Richard Vereka from War Spotting has said, for the first time in 2.5 years, Russia has not visually lost, or there's no visual confirmation. They lost a single T-90 tank. So this whole last month, and only the second month of the war after July 2022. I think they're now low on their best main battle tank in working condition. That's what Richard is surmising from that. So previous months you get, 51473, but this month 0 T90s. Overall, Russia is only visually confirmed to have lost 151 T90s, but a portion of the 333 unknown tanks will also be T90s, and others will have been lost and not photographed. At any point in time, there will be some damaged tanks that will need repairs. Russia claimed to have made 60 T90Ms in 2021. That number might be accurate, but I suspect it includes many upgrades from T90As. They also claim to have increased production to 18 a month. To achieve anything close to this, all or almost all will have been upgraded. So those are T90As to T90Ms. This is the Russian losses. All were T90As initially. It's a T90M that's a better tank. They're now predominantly losing T90Ms. The T90S is the export variant. There are some rumors that they took back some exports from India that were being brought back for upgrades, and some Indian reporters claim that the Russians helped themselves to those. But yes, mainly these are T90Ms, T90As, probably having been used for upgrades. What else? Richard continues, but the thing about upgrades is you eventually run out of the old tanks to upgrade. I suspect Russia effectively ran out of T90As to upgrade at least 6 months ago. New build T90Ms will be much more complicated, slower, especially when both international sanctions and with lots of other parts of the Russian defense industry competing for resources. T90s have always been small as a share of the total tank losses, but they have been falling since April 24. Russia may be keeping T90M equipped elite units in reserve, ready to respond to any mutiny in the rest of the army. If this is the case, it's probably a small unit. So you can see that there's been quite a significant drop over the recent period, recent months. To finish, well, he says just to some thanks there. So I think that's an interesting observation to make. It's also worth noting that increasingly Russians are using these sort of vehicles at the front during attacks, says Max 24. These are unarmored, just sort of trucks and whatnot. So, you put all these bits of data together and it's looking pretty challenging for the Russians. Now let's look at the Ukrainian losses to begin with. But suffice to say that the large proportion of civilian and ATV vehicles being used by the Russians could well be in attacks as combat assets, as I often state. Okay, Ukrainians have lost a Bogdana 2S22. They are producing these fairly rapidly compared to what they used to, but haven't seen too many of them lost recently or heard of any more updated schedules on their production. A few other bits of artillery. Then we're down to 5 tanks, 2 of which were destroyed. One Leopard 1A5 was damaged, hit by Vandal drone. We've got 2 infantry fighting vehicles, an abandoned CV 9040C, that's the Swedish infantry fighting vehicle that's very, very useful. You've got Bandvan S 10. Bandwagon, is that the BBS 10? Is that the articulated one? Let's have a look at that. I have a feeling it might be the articulated transport. Yeah, it's exactly that. So that is the again Swedish provided Bandvan Skydad 10. Looks like that. So that's been destroyed. It's been abandoned and hit by Vandal drone. A few other bits and pieces, not too much to worry about, and then a few civilian vehicles afterwards. For the Russians, an awful lot of kit here and a huge number of civilian vehicles, loafs, pickup trucks, motorcycles. Look at all those motorcycles taken out, flatbed trucks, ATVs, a lot of quads and golf buggies destroyed. Look at the sheer volume of absolutely destroyed pieces of kit there. Almost 100% the ATVs and a vast majority of the huge numbers of civilian vehicles. But going up to the going up to the combat assets, um, ratios marginally better. I don't often look at the artillery; it's the stuff below that because a lot of artillery gets damaged. You don't really know whether it's destroyed or not, and even if it is damaged, to repair the barrel on an artillery piece might put it out. It's functionally destroying it because if you can't get hold of the barrels, it might be easy to fix in principle, but in practice, that is a massive challenge for the Russians. So anyway, here we have a radar in IL-122 Harmony. Let's remind ourselves of that. I showed you one of these the other day. IL-122 Harmony, and these aren't particularly big, I don't think. Yes, so these are smaller bits of kit, so nothing too challenging for the Russians there. We have what do we have? BM-21 multiple launch rocket system taken out, and a range of howitzers and self-propelled guns there. Interesting that the Nemesis drone and the Vampire drone are doing quite a lot of this work. The Nemesis drone really quite handy, it seems. Let's remind ourselves of the Nemesis drone just to give you an idea. Let's go and look at some images. Hopefully, we can see. Yeah, there's the Nemesis drone, but there are different. It seems like some of these are bringing up hexacopters rather than the quadcopters, but they look like heavy quadcopters. They aren't just your little FPV drones. These are much more considerable bits of kit. Anyway, tanks. There's a good dozen tanks there, including a few track guarding sheds. Most of the tanks are unrecognizable. They're just put down as generic tanks. And that kind of feeds back into what Richard Fareka was saying, that there will be a lot of, no doubt, or some T90s that aren't being counted because they fall into the category of just tank. Not really sure what that is. And there's a difference between Andrew Perpetua's loss list and people like Oryx, that a lot of these won't be counted on the visually confirmed losses because they can't confirm what tank they are. And as a result, it's kind of skews the figures somewhat. I think Andrew Perpetua rightfully just says, look, it's a tank. I know that much, and it was destroyed or damaged, and we're going to add that to the list. A bunch of MTLBs, the old sort of APC tractor that the Russians are so keen on, and then just an awful lot of other kit. So Russians having some fairly substantial losses in equipment. Tim White says sensitive video, the type I don't normally post, which means I only have 36,000 instead of 360,000 followers, I guess. But this is from Ukraine's Commander-in-Chief Sursky. He says they neutralized 15,000 Russian invaders in Pokrovsk alone in January, 7,000 of whom died. So that's a one-to-one ratio of dead to wounded. That is absolutely incredible. That's a claim from the Commander-in-Chief. Make of it what you will, but here's a video that I can't show you. Lots of people getting blown up and whatnot, but that's coming from the Commander in Chief himself, and the claims are pretty Um, the claims are that there have been some pretty horrendous Russian losses. And to kind of support that, Andrew Perpetua said a lot of dead Russians today. So this was yesterday when he counts up the videos. So it might be coming out tomorrow. Um, and someone said more than usual. He said like 4 times normal, which would say, normally you're averaging about, oh, well, what is it? It's about 100 or so, isn't it? If we go and look at what he said for this particular day, which was 132, 18,155 and 159 days. So that is now over 100 a day. But if he's 4 times that, then you might be looking at a number of sort of 500 in a particular day upcoming. I don't know, pretty incredible. But that's Andrew Perpetua just saying, there's some pretty heavy Russian personnel losses coming in the figures from what he's seeing. Now, this is fascinating. Magyar's birds. So Rob Magyar, the guy that's in charge of now it's its own brigade, isn't it? 414th Separate Brigade of Strike Unmanned Aircraft Systems. So yeah, it is a brigade. Has posted the data about the results of their work in January. So this is 1 month's work. Here's a summary, auto-generated translation. So let's just go through this because it's incredible. This brigade is so prolific. Today is exactly 1 month since the moment of the transformation of the Magyar Bird Regiment into the 414th Separate Drone Brigade, and we report traditionally statistics and infographics and how the number of enemy targets, how many were hit and destroyed during January. 12,697 sorties have damaged, almost 13,000 sorties have damaged or destroyed 4,387, so almost 4,500 unique enemy targets. Among them, 79 tanks, 108 self-propelled guns and mortars, 151 BMPRs and BTRs, 3 MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, 519 units of light trucks and motor buggy transport, 196 units of network equipment, antennas and cameras, 53 fuel and lubricants tankers and depots, 28 drones, 1,935 personnel shelters and dugouts, full personnel of 2 Russian infantry battalions, 830 killed and 298 wounded. So these guys in 1 month, just alone with their drones, have killed 830 personnel and taken out another 300. To achieve this, the unit used 5,470 FPV drones with an efficiency of 38.8%. I don't know how the efficiency is calculated. I'd love to know that. Is it the number of drones that hit? Is it a degree of hit? What? So on and so forth. So, but it's going to be something like that. So almost 40% of their drones seem to do something, and then you're going to have other ones getting taken out by electronic warfare, predominantly getting shot down and intercepted in other ways, or just missing the target. Pilot error. Or very difficult to hit moving targets, etc., etc. 9,853 drone drop munitions. 2 mine dropping night drones have placed 273 mines. 41 bomber drones have been lost, with an average lifespan. I find this fascinating. The average lifespan of 86 sorties before being lost. I think that's incredibly high. So bomber drones uh, doing 86 sorties on average before they either fall apart, get shot down, electronic warfare takes them down, whatever. That is pretty damn good. And 187 Mavic drones have been lost with an average lifespan of 36 sorties before being lost. I presume they'll use more for reconnaissance Mavic drones in local areas, spotting targets. Rather, they're not used as FPV drones, but they might. I don't know if they can attach munitions to Mavics and whatnot. But anyway, otherwise, they'd be called bomber drones then. So, in really interesting stats there, I think, from Magyar, shows how important his unit is. I meant to show you some footage of this the other day, and I don't know what happened to it, but it's basically footage of these drones taking off from in the grass at the roadside. And then you'll see the drone will be facing the road, and you'll see a vehicle drive past, and then they take off and hunt down the vehicle. So this is a way of conserving battery power in the drones, and you kind of leave them on standby with the video feed, just keeping tabs on what is passing by. Forbes is reporting here that Ukraine deploys FPV drones as stealth roadside bombs to strike Russian convoys. Ukrainian forces are hiding FPV drones in roadside grass alongside supply routes in Kursk Oblast, enabling remote strikes on Russian vehicles. Interesting. Um, where next we've already gone through that. Here we have the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, attacking military targets yet again. Military targets in scare quotes because, of course, that is an ambulance and obviously is an ambulance. On the plus side, the stupid Vandal drone got disabled somehow and did no damage, but on the downside, they sent a second drone. So this is the murderousness of the Russians in that, well, our first drone failed in blowing up an ambulance, so we're going to send a second drone to blow it up. Attacking an ambulance once, maybe an accident. Getting so pissed that your drone broke that you attacked it a second time, you're a certified war criminal. And that's the sort of stuff that Andrew sees on a daily basis. I'm really, really, really at the end of my tether with the Russians. The Russian MOD are just a bunch of murderous bastards, and I hope to goodness they get what's coming to them. Just ah, um, and anyone that supports them in my threads can jog on. Ukraine's General Staff reports that today at 16:54, so this was yesterday, Russian aviation deliberately struck an internet in Sudia, Kursk region, with a guided bomb. Dozens of civilians, including women and children, were inside preparing for evacuation. Another Russian war crime, this time against his own people. So there's a lot of ink being spilt about this. Broadly, I've heard somewhere it was like an elderly person's home, but most people are reporting this as a boarding school. So Russia strikes a nursing home is what it says here, but I'm not sure that that's what most people are saying. In Kursk region's Sudzha, Ukraine's General Staff reports at the time of the attack, dozens of local residents were inside for the building preparing to evacuate. Ukraine's military said on February the 1st, adding that nearly 95 people could be trapped under the rubble. Now, this could be one of those ones where one side here, the Ukrainians claim that it was a civilian piece of infrastructure and the Russians destroyed their own civilian infrastructure within Sudzha, which is within Kursk. So you've got the Kursk Oblast into Russia, and the Ukrainians now control some of that, particularly Sudzha, and the Russians are now bombing their own infrastructure inside the Ukrainian controlled area. But it could well be that Ukrainians say, "Oh, it's a an old person's nursing home or a boarding school or whatever," and actually it's where the military are housed, and the Russians have actually targeted the Ukrainian military. It could be what's happened, but I don't think that's the case. I think this is genuinely accepted that the Russians have targeted their own civilians for whatever reason, probably by mistake. And this is somewhat confirmed by the Russians themselves. So Apti Alaudanov, the guy in charge of the Chechen Akhmat forces, recorded a video attempting to justify the attack on the boarding school in Sudzha. He claimed there should not have been civilians present and discussed tracking missiles and aircraft. So, in other words, it looks like the Russians did make a bit of an error there and have destroyed their own civilians inside the larger Kursk sector. Right, we're going to go to distance strikes now and look at what's taken place overnight. So we have, oops, what's happened there? I don't know. Oh no, I'm in the wrong place. We have at night Russia launching Shahid drones into Ukraine. Out of 55 in total, 40 were shot down, 13 was suppressed by electronic warfare. So that's pretty good. 43 out of 50, 53 out of 55 taken out in one way or another. Interesting to note that a couple of cruise missiles, I presume this is from yesterday, on the when Ukraine was hit with a larger missile strike, or the day before and into the night. One of the Russian Kh-72 missiles refused to leave Russian territory and crashed into Lipetsk region, almost 300 kilometers from the front line. So that is, a bit of a Russian boo-boo there. So what can we note about last night's activity? Well, massive fire broke out in a Kharkiv warehouse after the Russian drone attack. 2,000 square meters of a civilian enterprise in the Slobidski district. No casualties reported, but obviously some damage there. I don't really know of much else. There's a lot of talk still about what happened in the missile strikes on Odessa and Poltava particularly. The death toll has risen there to 14. Two more bodies were pulled out from under the rubble. 17 people injured, including 4 children. 22 were rescued. And do you remember I showed you that picture or the video of that chap from Poltava who was absolutely distraught? His son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter were all killed in the apartment. Well, here's a little granddaughter who is on camera with two, or a whole number of different pieces of art that she'd done, to promote peace, like the peace dove. And she is, in, um, in all her innocence, thinking about a future of peace and tranquility. And her life has been taken from her. Her parents have been taken as well. Just think how you would feel if you were that grandfather, grandfather and father, having lost three members of your family. So this is 9-year-old Sofia Yavorska from Poltava. Yesterday, Russian Kh-22 missile killed her along with her parents when her home was hit. Strike on a residential building has now claimed 12, actually 14 lives, as we have heard, including two children. And here's just one of the many people who were killed. One of the dead in the missile attack on a residential building in Poltava on February the 1st is Anastasia Kolvak. She was an actress and a co-author of productions, has been killed by Russia. So, the death and destruction continues on a daily basis, even if it isn't reported by mainstream media. Now, I don't usually include politics in this video, but I just wanted to alert you to distraction. Right? So I am reporting and will continue to report every day in the way that you are accustomed to. But just be warned that the world is going to go through a pretty crazy next couple of weeks, months, I don't know how long, as the US appears to be intent on starting economic fights with its neighbors and allies. And this will distract from Ukraine. The only person that's going to be happy with all of this happening, literally, like, Americans aren't going to be happy, Canadians and Mexicans and Europeans aren't going to be happy. This is a needless economic war. Putin will be happy. Putin will be happy here because of the distraction. Um, so, Edward Hunter Christie, imposing punitive tariffs on the Five Eyes. So these are intelligence partners. Canada is an intelligence partner in the Five Eyes. Will UK get tariffs? What about Australia and New Zealand? Doubt those two. But, part of the Five Eyes being attacked, an ally of the US, a country that sent troops to help the US in Afghanistan, is being targeted by Trump. So, imposing punitive tariffs on Five Eyes Intel partner whose soldiers fought and died alongside US troops in Afghanistan is just insane. Trump is a dishonorable man who wants America to become a dishonorable country, says Edward Hunter Christie. So when you've got the Wall Street Journal, a Murdoch-run pro-Republican newspaper, saying the dumbest trade war in history, Trump will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for no good reason, we need to be aware that this is going to impact the war in Ukraine, and not in a good way. There will be a lot of distraction going on, and Russia is going to be absolutely eating the popcorn, sitting back and watching this chaos ensue. Mark Carney, possible leader of the Liberal Party, he has had a very good interview on Newsnight, BBC Newsnight, where he absolutely was incredibly robust and was very strong on all sorts of things. I'm not going to read you through all this, but it was really um, it was really good to hear him be so robust. But this is not good news. Rory Stewart, the former Conservative MP from the UK, not agreeing. So Trump is treating US contracts and treaties as opportunities for extortion, US allies as clients to be fleeced, US security guarantees as protection rackets, and he's not forming alliances for a more stable and prosperous world, and he is introducing the code of the mafia. There's a lot of consternation going on here amongst allies that the West is eating itself. And this is, you might be a big fan of Trump, whatever. I don't care. This is bad news. All of this is bad news, and it's completely unjustified. And the Canadians are now realizing that this is nothing to do with fentanyl. This is to do with the 51st state of America. It's just like Greenland. Trump wants Canada. And we've just been pretty angry about, Putin doing that. And I don't see there's functionally much difference. This is CBC coming to the realization, and your man has said, well, been talking to a lot of analysts, and we're now realizing this.
They do think this is maybe all about that 51st state
Not
sovereignty
about fentanyl.
commentary from the U.S. president and his comments, weeks ago when, he ruled out using military force to acquire Canada, for lack of a better word, but talked about using economic force. Well, this is economic force. I mean, he can say it's about fentanyl, but the volumes just do not justify the tariffs at this level. I again go back to this, paper that we've talked about many times, Rosie, in our long conversations about Donald Trump in the past month, that Robert Lighthizer wrote that they see tariffs as a weapon to reshape global trade and force manufacturing jobs inside the continental borders of the United States of America.
So this is an assault on kind of globalization. This is America first. This is using economics as a force, as a weapon. And just remember that stuff like this is still happening. So NORAD has confirmed that fighter jets were scrambled from Alaska and Canada, and Russian warplanes were spotted in the Arctic region. So remember when Trump said that this wouldn't happen on his watch? It's only in week 2, and here we are, and it is happening. And there's a lot of distraction going on, and picking fights with your friends is going to allow an emboldened Russia to do what more it can in Ukraine, to get away with more murder, and to try and push the envelope with regard to the US. And the US is now kind of somewhat distracted. And you need Canada's help up there. So our adversaries can smell the incompetence from continents away, says Chris Jackson here. It's just incredibly worrying. And then the Kremlin itself is celebrating destruction of America's centuries of soft power, while the vacuum left will be filled by Russia and China that are doing the exact opposite of Trump. So the US aid is dead. RT Russia Today is absolutely loving the fact that US aid isn't about like just charitably helping the rest of the world. There will be elements of that, but this is a lot to do with America's soft power. And by cutting off US aid dead, 90-day complete moratorium on any kind of aid going out from the US is to cut off the US's soft power at a time where really it needs to be at its most potent. And it's incredibly worrying. I mean, I am super, super worried. This is why I'm talking about it in the context of hits and losses video, to just for us to be aware that it's going to be a crazy few weeks, and Ukraine is going to have to fight against these other narratives, literally on the battlefield, but also in the political spheres, to achieve their own agenda here. In an information space or set of information spaces that are going to be crowded with all sorts of crazy stuff going on. This is a time of chaos now. We've gone from rules-based norms and order to chaos. Trump is a purveyor of chaos. And here we are. Now, I'm going to leave you with this. So this is Eddie, an English guy who works at Base UA. I've interviewed Anton from Base UA twice. Pierre, who I've just been traveling around Ukraine with, works at Base UA and knows Eddie. This is a Base UA truck, and these guys were targeted during evacuations, targeted by the Russians, and it's absolutely freaking horrific. Bits of blood and guts and flesh all over that vehicle as it was hit by the Russians. Eddie's now lost most of his leg and his arm.
You saved me, man. You saved me.
He was saved by colleagues in the way that he saves and has saved many people from the horrors of war with the tireless work that Base UA do. So spare a thought for him, spare a thought for Base UA. Help them out if you can. They are a wonderful organization. And, follow Pierre on Pierre Dupont on Instagram to get a sense of what they do. Pierre's an absolute legend. Yeah, incredible. This may well be reported by the ICC, but or not. It's another war crime. So we actually go back to, I don't know. I'm not very good at Instagram, so I don't really know how to work it. But I just want to pause on some of this. Um, I don't know that I can. Um, Eddie here has been obviously working tirelessly for these guys, and the thanks he gets from the gods of war and from the Russians is a loss of two of his limbs. It's a really sad story. I just wanted to no, I didn't get that. Yeah, I'm not very good. Sorry, here we go. Right, this may well be reported by the ICC as the 140 1,632nd Russian war crimes committed in Ukraine since February 2023. Um, and then this next part here. Eddie is probably the most genuine, kindest person I've ever met and worked with in Ukraine, says Pierre. I will forever be grateful to Philip, who was alongside Eddie and kept him alive. And then we have, just calls to help Base UA in the work they do. So amazing stuff. And one day after his rehabilitation, I would certainly love to speak to Eddie to get his account of what happened. There are many heroes involved in the war in Ukraine, many fighting on the front lines, but also many fighting behind the front lines for the lives of others, fighting in very different ways, but no less heroically in many ways. So, thanks, Eddie, for what you have done. Thanks, Base UA, for what they consistently do. We talked about um, risk management, and of course, when you're operating in a war zone, you're never going to be without risk. And sadly, sometimes the things like this happen, and at least we can say that his life was not lost. Anyway, take care, everybody. Spare a thought for those less fortunate, and I'll speak to you soon.